So we're here at the house. It's early morning in late December, and I'm just preparing to leave for the next probably month and a half. We're going into the hot, dry, windy season here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica, on the west side of Rincon de la Vieja volcano, where we've got awesome volcanic soil, but really strong winds in the dry season. And we've just been working a lot these last few months on the farm to kind of establish this perimeter of the Zone 1, the area around the house, and kind of established more of a farm up near the water tank that I can walk over to and show you guys as well. But starting out, I'll just start showing everything near the house, like this pigeon pea that just sprouted up as a volunteer, which I thought was kind of cool to look at, so I've just been letting it grow. Pigeon peas are a really nice nitrogen fixing plant, chop and drop material. They grow really easily and are super hardy in tropical climates. When you let them grow, they kind of become trees. They call them frijol de palo, which is like tree bean, and they'll produce these bean pods that have seeds, which you can cook like any other bean, and they're really delicious. So this one I'm just kind of letting grow. We'll see how big it gets and maybe just keep it around for a long time. Down there we're looking at the shower, which we've planted some ornamentals around and poured gravel when we made it. Yet to have built walls. I don't even know if we want to build walls. It's really nice showering and looking at the sunset right there after a long day of work. And then here's the compost toilet. So we've been adding wood to this. We've got teak on the stairs and the platform there, and then Achiote walls, which we're still in the process of designing and building, but it's nearly ready to be used. Capturing our waste mixed with sawdust and letting it break down to create a humanure compost for us to amend our baby fruit trees with, like this one over here. Here in this funky little windbreak chamber, we've got an Achiote tree, which, if you don't know, produces this really cool seed pod that's bright red with bright red seeds inside that you can use to color food or paint your skin or dye clothes. And we've got drip irrigation going to that, as well as all of our other little plants around the house. Here we've got this banana circle, so this is something I'm really excited about. We dug a couple of these. We dug one here and one over there behind that sugarcane. We used the soil to make that hügel bed, which I'll get to in a minute. But this banana circle is really exciting because we're going to be able to plant dwarf bananas all along the edge of it. Our neighbor has these really nice bananas that are super delicious and produce huge racks. They only reach about 6 feet tall, so they do really well in the wind, which is why we want them here. So we'll plant them all along the edge of this pit, and then we'll continue to use this pit how we already have been using it, which is kind of as a slow compost pile. We've been throwing our food scraps from the kitchen into this pile, covering it with a bit of chopped grass that's not hard to come by around here, and then just letting it break down. And the idea with this is that it'll feed the bananas as it breaks down. The bananas can suck up all the nutrients from our food scraps, and the other way that they'll be able to get some hydration is from our house's Greywater. So this line you can see, because we're yet to have covered it, is the Greywater from both our indoor and outdoor sink. So whenever we're using that sink, the Greywater can come here and we can extend this pipe into the banana circle so that these bananas can suck up all the water and eat all the food scraps as we use our kitchen for years to come. So moving down here towards the shower, you can see we've got, well, this mulberry plant that we planted as a cutting that's really started growing well. So we gave it some drip irrigation off of this 1/4-inch line and compost from the pile we created and some wood chip mulch. And we've got these spiky ornamental plants planted about a year ago that are bushing out around the shower, our teak deck, and our simple outdoor shower. Then on the other side of it, we've got some arrowroot growing. Arrowroot, I've talked about before, is a root that you can use kind of like corn flour. It's really starchy, and when you powder it, you can use it in cooking as a thickening agent. And then here, we made a hügel bed. And so a hügel bed is a bed where you basically use woody organic matter and pile it up in the shape of a bed that you want, and then cover that with soil. They do really well to retain moisture. As it breaks down, there's a lot of space for nutrients and microorganisms to accumulate and keep feeding the soil above. So I've got this piece of roofing on top of it right now, which is actually just holding this polytube line, which we don't have any sprinkler heads or button drippers on right now because there's nothing planted in this bed, but when we do plant it, we will have that going. I'm thinking this is going to be an herb garden. We've mulched it really well with all these grasses. In the rainy season, we're going to pull that mulch aside and plant various herb transplants, things we want to use for the kitchen or process and make medicine out of right by the house. The reason we've decided on herbs is because obviously it's a hügel bed, there's sticks underneath the soil, so it's not a great place to grow something like a root crop or something with very profound roots like a bigger perennial shrub or tree. So we'll just grow small herbs. The other thing is it's in the shade a lot of the time of this corral tree because the sun kind of follows this path, and so the corral tree gives it pretty much constant shade throughout the day, so a lot of herbs can grow well with partial shade. So I'm thinking we'll just have a really cool, eclectic, varied herb garden there next to this kind of eclectic part of the garden, which has a giant clump of vetiver, which perhaps we'll dig up and separate and line the back edge of this bed with, just further preventing this grass from our zone 2 coming into this nice peanut grass patch in our zone 1. We've got some sugarcane growing here. Also kind of for seed, I think come rainy season we'll chop this up into many cuttings and plant it all over the place. Eventually build ourselves a trapiche where we can juice it and be drinking jugo de caña with ginger and lemon in it all the time. We've got this Mexican sunflower which is just preparing to put out new flowers after I cut it a couple weeks ago, really short. It's bushed out a lot. This is a great chop and drop plant, Tittonia diversifolia if you haven't heard of it. It's a phosphorus accumulator, and it's just growing nicely here next to our other banana circle that we dug. So we use the soil from these 2 banana circles to mound up this hügel bed. This one we might actually use for something like papayas. You can kind of do the same idea but with papayas and just fill weeds from the garden in the pit or food scraps, whatever you want. We have this row of pineapples going up this way next to the house. We actually got our first couple of pineapples off of these plants. This one produced a pineapple. It was very delicious, bright yellow. We planted the tops of the 2 we ate right here, so there's a little gap, but soon these guys will be growing to fill that in. And yeah, that's kind of the zone around the house, at least in the front area. So now we'll head back to the garden and I'll show you what's going on there, and then up towards the water tank to show you all the systems there. On the way over, we've just built this roof extension, so now we have an area to work outside. For example, when it's raining, before we were just working in the house, but now that the house is all finished and clean and tiled up on the inside, we need a space to be able to do woodworking and things like that that's not inside the house. So we've just got this area, which is a really huge plus for us. Under this tarp, I've got the compost pile, which comprises of cow manure, sawdust, and grass cuttings. We put that together a couple months ago and it's just been getting turned, and we've been adding molasses every week. It's been breaking down really nicely and I've been adding that to different plants around the garden. But here's the garden, which we seeded the 2 main beds of last year with pigeon peas here. So we've got a ton of pigeon peas growing. Not even sure what I'm going to do with them. If anything, they're just fixing nitrogen into the soil. I can chop them down a bit and maybe leave a few to get really big and produce beans. In this other bed I've got yucca. So yucca or cassava, really great root crop, very delicious, easy to process and cook. And we've just got it on this drip line, so you can see the irrigation system's on right now and all the drippers are just going, so these are getting watered without us having to do anything but turn a valve. There's a lot of mulch on the ground, wood chip mulch we just grabbed from the side of the road. The cell phone company here, Issei, has been putting up phone lines, and they cut trees and made a big pile of wood chips. So we scooped those up in a truck and brought them up here and have been using them all over the place over the past few months. Here we've just got some ginger. You can see some coming to the surface there. And right there, a bunch of turmeric. So we're just gonna keep those on drip and let them keep growing through the dry season. And then there's this wall of lemongrass, which we just have planted pups of, which is becoming really established and serving as kind of an edge to the garden, to this space, this kind of in-between space that we've cleared off, planning to plant grass in during the rainy season. So we'll plant a low, kind of just a nice ground cover grass, so we can use this space as a place to sit and relax on these big rocks, and potentially string up some shade cloth and have it be a little nursery space in the future. All along this driveway we planted some ornamental plants. So we have this coleus that is kind of bushy coleus that gets kind of big, that I planted from cutting, and then I planted this purple spiky plant, which I don't know the name of, but it gets also bushy but stays low, so it'll be bordering the edge of this walkway to the house really nicely once it's growing well, and on this side as well. So we have a bit of water going to each of those lines, and hopefully that'll start to look really nice. Here's a cotton plant that I planted a long time ago. I just topped it right here. It was much taller, but I wanted to make sure that it doesn't get blown over by the wind, so with a few different plants I just cut them at a certain spot so that they can grow new branches but also not be too top heavy and get destroyed by the wind. But this cotton is growing really well. It actually just produced its first seeds the other day and was flowering where I cut it off. But it's cool to see cotton growing like a perennial here in the tropical climate, and to just have that tree as an example of where all the fiber for most of our clothes comes from, grown here on the farm. Here's something that's cool. All over this property there's these trees, which are laurel, which is a wood that we used a lot of for the house, for the windows and such. So it's pretty cool to see that we have a lot of laurel growing here, along with a lot of oak, or encino as they call it here, and guasimo. Really nice, beautiful trees. These Madero Negros are some trees that I planted from other trees that were grown on the property. So I stuck branches in the ground a couple of years ago when we first got up here, and now they're just lining the edge of the garden space really well. So that's the area kind of by the house, and then you come up here a bit uphill of that where we've got some coconut trees growing in a line. We've got those two more established ones, then this one that I planted about a year ago, and then 3 more that you can barely see because I just planted them the other day. They're in a line bordering the road, so we'll be able to have a nice line of coconut trees just on the edge of the property right next to all these pineapples. So these are the pineapples that I planted almost a year and a half ago from teeny little pups, which are all growing really well. No fruits yet, but we've been taking care of them, weeding them, and using this mulch. I planted a couple mulberries in between them. So here's a mulberry. It's actually a Pakistani mulberry, really cool variety that I brought from the States, and it's still growing. I planted that last rainy season, and a few others that are doing all right. Most of them didn't make it, I think, too much rain, but there's still about 5 or 6 grown on the property, and with water from the irrigation and lots of sun this summer, they should be doing really well. These bushy grasses are a few clumps that I brought up right before I left last time and planted, which is a citronella grass. So it has a pretty unique, nice smell, and it's just a good clump grass that's a source of biomass and growing here alongside the pineapples. Here's another laurel tree. It just provides the pineapples a little bit of partial shade during the heat of the day. And then we go over here and we see this tree, which is still very little, planted before the rains, and it got a lot of water, and I think maybe a bit too much water for its liking, but was able to survive and strengthen its roots. So now we've got it on drip. This is a cinnamon tree. Hopefully it's going to be growing a bit better throughout the dry season. Behind it here is a line of avocado seedlings. These I brought from my neighbor Brock's property on Hacienda Las Imagenes, and these are some local avocado varieties that grow really well here. I have 15 of them in a line here with these pallet brick windbreaks because we get really strong winds from over near the volcano. And the idea with these is that hopefully they'll live through the dry season, and when I return in the rainy season I'll be able to dig them up and kind of plant them all over the place. They might be great rootstocks for grafting onto, so we'll see. Once these trees get bigger, we might end up grafting the varieties we really like onto them. And then here's another system that I planted before the rainy season. It's these 6 posts, which are Jocote trees. Jocote is a tree that grows all over the place here. You can plant from post that has a nice kind of sour little fruit, but the reason we've planted it is to use it as trellises for this dragon fruit. So these cacti you see growing here, which have sprouted a bit of new growth in the past month, are dragon fruit cacti, and they'll crawl up this, sending roots onto the branch, and eventually be fruiting with dragon fruit, or pitaya as they call it here. They also got a lot of rain during the rainy season and didn't send up a lot of new growth, but now that it's getting dry, we'll see how they like it and hopefully see a lot of new growth when we return. These are some coil palms. Vino de coyol is a beverage they serve that's made from this tree. When it's cut down, the liquid inside it can be fermented into this kind of white coconutty alcoholic beverage, which is actually quite nice. And they're growing wild all over the property, which I've read is a sign of really great soil fertility. So we're lucky to be on the side of this volcano where we've got this awesome volcanic soil. I've seen it myself digging down. You can dig for about a meter before you reach any sort of clay in most spots on this property. Here's a little pigeon pea that I've just left in the ground. It was like a volunteer that sprouted up. Our water tank, and underneath we've kind of used this as a little bodega storage space for various materials. The lines that come off of the main line to our property, the spigot here we've attached the hose to, as well as these two lines which are irrigating the garden with just this switch. So I can open it up and we'll see all the button drippers start to have water flowing out of them, and then we have a line of course off of it going to the tank, which is filtered in these two filters on the side of the wall there. Provides water for our house, for our sinks and our showers. Last, I'd say, but not least, is this little San Pedro cactus. It was gifted to me as a dried out little piece of a cactus that had fallen on the ground over at the Living Library, which is in the Diamante Valley. There, my friend Chris grows thousands of San Pedros and peyotes and various medicinal plants just for the preservation of the species. And so we have this one growing here, and we water it about every 2 weeks. Just on the outside of the house, getting full sun. So things are starting to look really good around here. Every time we come back, we're making more and more progress. There I am. But that's pretty much all for now that I would want to show, and we'll check back in when we're back in the rainy season, planting out new areas. Thanks for watching.